you're trying to develop a plan to do something that nobody has ever done before. That is probably the biggest challenge. So you have no idea what challenges you're going to face. You have really no idea how long we try to make guesses at how long things will take us, but nobody knows. Like, we've never done it before. And like I said, we don't even know if it will work. We can make milestones about, at this point, at this time, we have to make a decision to go with it or ditch it, right? Because sometimes you don't have the luxury of just pursuing a thing endlessly.
Welcome to Impact Quantum.
Quantum podcast, turn it up fast. Candace and Frank blowing my mind at last. Quantum podcast, they're breaking the mold. Science has got beats, it's bold, and it.
I have my Earl Grey tea.
Oh, nice. Very Picard.
I just coffee leaves an aftertaste that I just can't
It's
get
an
over. I
acquired
love the
taste,
smell
yeah.
of it. Well, I drank it for a long time, and then my husband, when we were dating, switched me to tea, and then I got used to tea, and now I'm like, no, I don't want to go back to coffee. It's just so just intense.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Let's see. So, where are you based?
I am now in Apex, North Carolina, so the
Oh,
Raleigh,
okay.
Durham area.
Okay. I currently work for Red Hat, at least for another week or two.
Oh,
So,
nice. I
almost
think,
certainly you've heard of them living in Raleigh.
yes, Akita, my husband worked for them for a brief period. So he started working for Ansible, which was acquired by Red Hat.
That's right, yeah.
And then he just had to go start his own thing, so he quit. And then his friend Matt Jones has been there for a long time. He also came on with Ansible. I
Okay.
still know somebody else that works there too.
So I'm just opening up the LinkedIn because I realized I had closed it. So I refer to you, Rachel Noek, as
Oh, you're at the Duke Quantum Center. I've heard a lot of things about that.
Yes.
Nice.
There we
Nice.
go.
And I overheard you admiring our production process. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's just floors.
I've been doing podcasting, streaming from one form or the other for maybe like 12 years, and kind of like at one, maybe longer, but at each stage I did like a 1% better, 1% faster, like over the time. And now it's to the point where we can get a show out within an hour. Like, it's like ridiculously fast now.
So I just want to ask you, are you a senior research scientist at IonQ?
No. So
Okay.
I was a senior staff technical program manager at IonQ, and now I am a senior research scientist, but in reality, a technical program manager at Duke.
Okay, at Duke. Okay, that's what I needed. Okay.
And you made photonic kits for kids? That's so cool.
I did. I have one electronic thank you poster, and I have one like written by hand thank you poster from
That's
classes
cool.
that use my thing. Yeah, right before I moved here, the teacher that was like one of the best that I worked with, he sent me a thing saying like, okay, 3 years ago, you loaned us these kits. Can we buy them now? I'm over here like, I quit that a while ago because I just, I needed to make money.
Yeah.
And I ended up, giving him all my prototypes. I had like 14 prototypes of these massive 3D prints. They were like this big. And I gave them to that school because they were going to use them. It was
That's
a good
cool.
experience. Yeah.
Let's see.
Very nice.
So I'm ready when you are.
I'm ready.
Awesome. Hello. Oh, sorry. I know I got a cough.
Sorry, I had to clear my throat right at the same time as you.
It's contagious virtually, right? So what's really funny is that the guy that I interviewed just now runs a company called Impala. So like I had that T-shirt, so I thought that was funny. All right. Hello and welcome to Impact Quantum, the podcast where we explore the emerging industry that is quantum computing, where you don't need to have a PhD, you just need to be a little bit curious. And with me on this journey into the quantum realm is the most quantum curious person I know, Candace Gahuli. How's it going, Candace?
It's going great. Thank you for asking. I'm really excited about today. We have a guest who I featured on the Women in Quantum podcast, and she just was so fascinating. I really wanted to get her on this podcast as well. So we have Rachel Noek, and she is the Senior Research Scientist, Technical Program Manager at Duke. Hi, Rachel.
Very
How are
cool.
you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
And no problem. And I think you're the first person to be on the Women in Quantum show to come over to Impact Quantum. So we've had a couple of people do things the other way, but you're the first to come in this direction.
Oh, cool.
So, and we were talking in the virtual green room about the Raleigh-Durham area, and I've heard a lot about the Duke Quantum Center. So I'm very curious about this. Like, what is the Duke Quantum Center? Obviously, it's attached to Duke University.
That's right. It's just basically they formed a center to focus on quantum technologies, quantum computing, quantum sensing. And so they started the center to attract, talented faculty and to concentrate funding for quantum studies at Duke.
Interesting. And it makes sense. There's a Duke, that area, Raleigh area, Raleigh-Durham Triangle, has a history of research and semiconductors. I think IBM was there. A couple of game companies were there. Obviously, Red Hat was there, and there's a lot of interesting tech kind of startups in that area. So it's I'm glad to hear that they're taking this seriously. That's cool.
Yes, I'm hoping to see, now that I'm located here in North Carolina, I am hoping to see even more quantum industry and, more activity in quantum in the area. It's really
Very
exciting to watch
cool.
it grow.
Cool. What is the Duke Quantum Center do? Like fundamental, if you had to give like an elevator pitch for what it is, like what would that be?
Promoting research and education in quantum. That is fundamentally like what their core objective is. So when you see, funding for the center is like, what does it focus on? It focuses on bringing in talented faculty, engaging with the community, the quantum community, to promote interactions in the quantum community that are, there's cross center funding, there's, it's supported by Pratt University or Pratt School of Engineering at Duke University. It's part of Duke Quantum Center is part of Pratt, I believe. But yes, and while we're interviewing, I should also mention that I'm not representing Duke Quantum Center or INQ or anyone else. My views are my own. So I don't want to get in trouble
We're
with
just here
anyone.
having a, no, that's good. That's a good thing to point out. You're just here having a conversation. So education, one of the things I saw in your LinkedIn profile that we were also talking about in the green room was you made photonic kits for kids to learn. Tell me more about that. I'm curious.
I did. I had a few ideas.
Mhm.
I went all the way through prototyping one of my ideas. It was basically, what do people not see about lasers in toys and kits and things like that? And I wanted to really expose younger people to lasers besides playing with their cat or their dog. And so I had this idea where you could look at how lasers interact with liquids, because that's not something that most
Interesting.
people are exposed to or think about. So I made a kit that has 3 different lasers that kind of represent the visible spectrum. So there's like a blue, a green, and a red. And then I had, I went through and I hired an artist on it just to hired an artist to make like educational pieces. So to talk about the experiments you could do. And I wrote the content, but the artist made some really nice art. So I have a little card deck that goes with the kit. So it's basically like this little workstation where at the front you have 3 buttons, one for each laser. And then you have these different clear cups that you put in that are different shapes. So now you can use the liquids in the cup to act like lenses. And because there's 3 lasers, you can sort of see what happens when those lasers pass through the different cups. Does the laser focus afterwards? Does it diverge? But anyways, it was a cool idea. And I ended up having a few schools test and work with it. And, actually they really enjoyed it. When I started working at INQ is when I kind of shut down the business and decided, to work somewhere else instead of having a business. And at that time, I asked for the kits back, and one of the schools said, "Well, wait, can we just use them to the end of the year? Because we're in the middle of teaching with them." And so I thought nobody's using these kits, so it was very exciting that they were actually using them. And so of course I let them keep them to the end of the year, and then I collected them and I just actually gave them back.
Oh, cool.
After 3 years, they asked for them, and I said, no warranty, no guarantees, but you can have the kits. So it was a great experience, and they were very kind and encouraging, and gave me lots of opportunity to see the kids, interact with them. Yeah, so that was in a high school physics classes at Sandia High School in New Mexico.
Interesting. So you've been in industry. I'm sorry, Candace, go ahead.
Why do you think hands-on learning experiences are so important when teaching complex topics like light, optics, and quantum science?
Well, you can say something like the light is absorbed. And then you can say like, okay, but if you shine a laser through a liquid that absorbs that frequency, and you can see it basically just disappear as it travels through the liquid gradually, that's different. Or how, you could see the laser passing through the liquid, it absorbs that frequency, but emits a different frequency. Olive oil or something, you pass a laser through, a blue laser through it, and it emits red. So you can see it changing color, and you have to understand, like, why is it changing color? So there's a lot of experiments that you can talk about, but seeing it is just, it's different. You can remember it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Experiential learning is definitely the best. So I'm sorry, I just think it's interesting because you've been in academia, you've been in industry, and now you're back and kind of an academic capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a very unique perspective on the quantum ecosystem and kind of the scene, if you will.
Yeah, it's very different in academia and industry, I can tell you that.
What, I don't want to ask you to pick which one you like more, but what's your take on kind of the current state of academia being, for lack of a better term, invaded by basically the startup world, right? It's an interesting time in this.
I think it's important to remember that they serve different core functions. Like, academia is there to educate and to do deep research. Companies are committed to turning out a product. So if I was to say, like, how, now that I've been in both situations, how would I sort of divide things up if I had control over everything? I would say academia, let's concentrate focusing on doing new things and trying, like, fundamentally different things, because it's very hard to find the budget and the time and the personnel at a company to do those things. It's just hard because you have priorities. If you're trying to turn out a product, your people will get sucked in as the product becomes, gets behind delivery schedule or whatever. You're going to need all your talented people to help. And the core research, it's going to be very hard to not disrupt it. So if I had to pick, I would say core research, keep it going. Have those people that are doing that be learning, be getting PhDs. And then in industry, have these startups or these companies really work on saying, like, okay, here is what works fundamentally. Like, here's the physics that we need. Now let's go turn it into a product. And when I say that, there's like all this engineering that needs to happen to make it like this computer that I'm talking to you on, right? There's just a long way to go in terms of stability, consumer operation of the quantum computer. There's just a whole immense amount of work to be able to have it look like the computers that we're all used to. And so I would split the work in that way, where you can hire a lot of engineers who are focused on engineering and making things better, more stable, toleranced designs, and focus on that in industry, because you can hire engineers and you can focus and spend that time, but no one can get a PhD doing that. And then in academia, push through the PhDs where they're doing this novel research. We have, the Quantum Center, we're doing things that nobody's done before. We're thinking about totally different ways of doing gates or operating quantum computers. And so that is the kind of thing that should stay in academia. That is how people get PhDs, that really novel work. So I don't think there doesn't need to be a lot of like contention between the two. It's just like dividing the work appropriately and funding each thing to do the right work, to my way of thinking.
No, I agree. I just was interesting was I went to my first conference, was about a year ago, first quantum conference. And it was definitely it was an interesting mix of humanity, right? Because you had people who were doing pure research, and then you had people who were clearly startup founders. And I wouldn't say it was like oil and water, but it was definitely, you can definitely tell like it was a different vibe, right? Because I'm used to like the tech conferences where it's you know how those can be, right? Like the swag, the people, but this was more kind of low key in that regard. And I've been to research conferences too, and kind of was an interesting hybrid of the two worlds, which I had never really seen before, those two worlds mix. And you're right, it doesn't have to be confrontational, but I'm old enough to remember when I made the switch from software development into data science, there was definitely a kind of, there were people who were old school math people, and there were people who were kind of converts like me, kind of coming into the space, and it definitely changed the dynamic. Again, it doesn't have to be adversarial, but it was certainly an interesting time to go into, and it was interesting to say the least, right? But I think that might just be a growing pain of the maturing of an industry, where it goes from strictly academic to you need the R and the D, basically, is what I'm saying.
Yes, exactly.
So, what lessons from the early research days still influence how you approach quantum today?
In early research days is when you learn really fundamentally what research is. And that stays with you, right? That would be things like, we have a task to do a certain thing, and the answer might be, we can't do that. Or we can do that, but the answer isn't always 100% favorable. So those are definitely things that have stuck with me all the way through. And sometimes they apply to more than just deep research too. Sometimes with it's like almost similar, very similar. I'm a project manager, as a technical project manager, sometimes the answer is you can't have the program be on time and have all the specs that you want, right? Like you have to, there's some give and take. So yeah, those are probably the key, most fundamental things. If that's what you meant. I'm not sure if you meant that or if you meant like actual like quantum research. But
No, that was perfect. That was perfect.
What do you think is next for quantum, right? You're kind of you're really at the cutting edge of, and is the Duke Quantum Center kind of like a bridge for kind of like the research and kind of the R and the D, right? Is that kind of a good way to put it?
Duke definitely positions themselves to strongly support startups, even to the point of giving startups space. So the Duke Quantum Center is mostly, I'm actually not positive, I think it's mostly located in what's called the Chesterfield building on Main Street in Durham, North Carolina. Okay. And in the Chesterfield building, there is also space for startups. So that's, that space is provided by Duke. I don't know all the details about that, but I do know that they have that space reserved for startups to reduce the cost of initiating a startup.
So it's like an incubator of sorts.
Exactly.
Right? That's
of sorts,
cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's great because eventually one of those startups or more than one of those startups will end up being a big deal and then going on to do great things. And the fact that they're located near Raleigh, I think it's good for the local economy too, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
So what surprised you the most when you first went into industry from academia, when you began working professionally in the industry?
Honestly, probably not just the pace, but the hierarchy and reporting is wildly different. And I had been in government where a lot of that, just based on my position, was kind of obfuscated from me. And then I was in academia for a very long time. So prior to going into industry, I have had no exposure, and I wasn't really close with a lot of people that worked in industry. So it was very new for me. But essentially, the hierarchy is such that, and the work that people have to do at each level of the hierarchy is so different. At least it seems to me. I haven't had all those positions, right? But that the demands on them are so different that how much they can be involved in any level of detail is wildly different. So, for example, I now work for Professor Ken Brown who is now also the director of the Duke Quantum Center. Again, my opinions are my own. You know, don't take this as like I'm ever speaking for Ken, but he is very involved in, you know, the details of what his students are doing at the same time as he's leading the Quantum Center.
Right.
You don't really see that so much in industry. At least I haven't had this vast, wild amount of experience in industry, right? It's somewhat limited, but certainly it was very different when I was there, where there was certainly an interest and a desire to be in the details. However, the bandwidth, there are so many more just miscellaneous things required of those very senior positions that it's difficult for them. So a role like mine as a technical project manager or technical program manager, it looks very different because I was the go-between that provided the key information just for the leadership to be informed about what was going on. And without me, there was no summary version. So at the Duke Quantum Center, it looks a little bit different, right? As a technical project manager there, Ken already knows more or less what's going on, right? He attends all the meetings already. And so he can basically stay on top of things. I worry about all the details for him. But still, in terms of like driving the lower level things, but he still is very aware, and he talks to the program manager at NSF and things like that, right? Where I would have handled things like that at INQ when I was there. So yeah, it's a very different scene. And certainly for my role, it's very different just interaction and what kind of go-between I provided the team and the leadership.
NSF, I assume, is the National Science Foundation.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, just checking. We like to be acronym friendly for newbies here.
Oh yes,
So,
very good.
And I have to be very extra cautious of that because I live in the DC metro area. So there's a good overlap, not just with technology acronyms, but also federal IT acronyms, which get pretty wild too. So FISMA, FIPS, all that sort of thing. So,
well, before I use it, I'm sure I will at some point. The DQC stands for Duke Quantum Center.
Awesome. Not the Dairy Queen Center, although that sounds tastier.
No ice cream today.
No ice cream today.
So you were talking about being a program manager, and I'm just kind of thinking about what makes program management particularly challenging in deep tech environments.
You're trying to develop a plan to do something that nobody has ever done before. That is probably the biggest challenge. So you have no idea what challenges you're going to face. You have really no idea how long we try to make guesses at how long things will take us, but nobody knows. Like, we've never done it before. And like I said, we don't even know if it will work. We can make milestones about, at this point, at this time, we have to make a decision to go with it or ditch it, right? Because sometimes you don't have the luxury of just pursuing a thing endlessly. For example, in industry, you can't necessarily have the freedom to pursue a new technology to include in a product for forever. At some point, the product has to be released, and you have to decide, will that be useful for another product, or should you just stop, just based on timing? So there's things like that, that are definitely challenging and unique to research. So that would be like a technical program manager specific type challenge.
Well, and you're in a field where there are no best practices, right? anyone who's worked in enterprise IT knows, like, well, what are the best practices? Best practice is this, best practice is this. Let's subscribe to this consulting service that tells us what the best practices are. But if you're in that situation where it's never been done before, clearly that's not an option.
Yeah, for the work, there's no real best practices. There's
Right.
best practices in the technical program management,
Right,
which you
right,
can
right.
apply to this unique situation. But yeah, there's no guidelines. You're kind of just out there, and one of the big challenges is having to overcome all the ambiguity. And
Right.
so that's another thing that, in my role that I help teams with when they get bogged down and they can't decide what to do. Helps either setting up milestones to help them decide, or just, walking them through the process of thinking about making the decision and, deciding when to start this work or stop that work, because sometimes it's very hard to tell.
You talked about communication and setting up deadlines and priorities. What other types of skills make someone a successful a program manager in perhaps the quantum space?
Generally, not just in quantum, but it applies in quantum too. And I would say this is probably where the real value comes in, is in one's ability to solve problems. And
Okay.
ideally solve problems before people even realize there are problems. If everything seems to be going smoothly, then probably a program manager somewhere is doing a very good job, because it seems like not a big deal because the program manager saw it coming and started dealing with it before it really became a big thing, or as soon as something did happen, was on top of it and came up with numerous potential solutions and worked with the team to decide the best and just move forward. So those are the key things.
Okay,
Interesting.
thank you.
What what would you say to someone who's starting their career, or they're starting in university, say, and they want to get into quantum? Right. Obviously, it depends on what, are they scientific, or are they, because one of our thesis for this show, one of our working principles for this show is the idea that the quantum industry is going to need people who can rack and stack stuff. They're going to need people who can market it. They're going to need, it's not just going to be about the physicist, right? There's going to be a lot of, obviously right now, you really have to kind of understand the quantum nature of these things to develop software for it. But at some point, there's going to be abstraction layers that are going to, there's going to be a whole new type of software engineering discipline, right? So you're going to need a whole spectrum. You're going to need a village, if I may use that analogy to sell this. Like, what would be your advice to someone who's just starting university and being, well, what should I study?
I would say think about what is the most interesting part to you, because if you're interested in doing the math and being in the lab, maybe you belong in the research section.
Right.
If you really love talking to people about it, there's a few places you can be. And if you really, if you're very organized and you're very on top of things and you like leading things, then being a project manager may be your thing. It really depends what your skills are and what you love doing. And, things like there is no Bachelor of Science in Technical Project Management. That's not something people study. That's something people train on later, right? You go focus on something technical and you have develop a technical understanding of how technical work is done. And then
Right.
you go develop those skills later. But so I would say focus on what you enjoy, and then think about, as you develop those skills, how they can apply to quantum. And watch for positions, because you will see all kinds of positions open already.
Right. We're pretty early on in this revolution, right? We're kind of in the transistor days, I think. I like to say that I was born too late to, be there when transistors started becoming a thing and you had some Fairchild semiconductor and all that lore. And I'm definitely born too soon to go and explore the solar system, but I am just on time for this quantum revolution.
Yeah, sounds about right.
What research areas in academia do you believe are currently underappreciated, but could have a major impact on the future of quantum technologies?
You mean outside of quantum or
Right.
physics?
Yes. That would be that you
That's an
could.
interesting question. I think I mentioned this in our other podcast, Candace, and this is something that's just near and dear to my heart and that I want to see. So that's maybe biasing me a little bit, but I would really think that biology and some of these other health sciences type backgrounds, they need to start learning quantum too to understand how to use quantum computers as they become available to solve their specific kinds of problems. Now, that might just happen inherently, like as just like we have started using GPUs for miscellaneous computing tasks. And some people understand and know that they're using a GPU for those tasks, and other times they're blind to it and the computer is deciding. But I am sure that there will be problems, many problems that can be better solved using a quantum computer. And so right now it's like a very specific, deliberate thing to use a quantum computer to solve anything. But someday, those quantum computers will be available and tied in with classical computers. And you could say, like, use the quantum computer for this part of the calculation. So that could be all over, though, especially anytime you get into complex or especially any kind of quantum systems.
Yeah, I think eventually we're going to see a QPU, right? Like,
Yeah.
It may be a while before we see that kind of being very, mainstream, but, I think I could easily see this.
Definitely. I mean, I envision that. That's what I want to see happen in the next 10, 20 years is those reasonably sized, powerful, smallish, independently operating quantum computers, right? Those QPUs, like you're talking about. Right now, we call it a QPU, but it's the size of a room, right?
Right.
It's literally like
Right.
the
Huge.
70s, the 70s to classical computers.
Well, that's what's exciting though, right? Because you can just imagine what's going to, we know we do have, it's not going to follow exactly the same track, but we do kind of have a rough idea of how miniaturization could change this. And even though it may take a while before this becomes a full-on, quote unquote thing, we do kind of have a rough idea of what this could be for the future.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think that's something we learned from the computers that we've lived through, right?
Right.
To everything to having these cute little phones in our hands. All of us that have seen that miniaturization happen, it's just so phenomenal. And we now understand that can really happen for something like a quantum computer too.
Right. I look at my kids and they just can't fathom the idea that getting an LCD screen in color was very expensive. Right. I mean, I remember when I first saw my first color laptop and it was just blew my mind. We would laugh at that today because it was, very thick. I think it might have been an early MacBook, or I don't know if it was called a MacBook, but whatever it was just, it blew my mind that it was just color on a flat screen, or even just seeing a flat screen TV compared to the old CRTs. And that's a simple example, right? Obviously, there's plenty of, more profound examples. Kids today, and I'm old enough now, I could say kids today,
Get off my lawn.
get off my lawn. We were looking at getting a used car, and it had the built-in TV screens, which at one point was like a big deal. But when my 11-year-old saw it, he's like, "Oh, it has no HDMI input." Like, oh
Oh,
man, like,
jeez.
he was just like, "What is this? We'll have to replace this, rip and replace this." And I'm looking at him like, "With whose money there, pal?"
Right. He's like, he's already
Indeed.
optimizing himself. That's fantastic.
And then
Honestly, I
when,
see those built-in technologies in the car, and I'd rather have one that connects and displays my technology so that in 10 years, I keep my cars forever. So
Mhm.
in 10 years, it's not so clunky and outdated because it's using my modern technology.
Yeah, well, that's Apple Car or Android Auto, I think, has done a really good job of solving that problem where your car is a monitor, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but no, it's funny how quickly technology goes. When this was some years ago, it might have been almost 10 years ago when I said to I had to burn a CD, right? And now he's a teenager, but at the time he might have been like 10 or 11, and he was like, "Whoa, cool! Can I help you?" And I was like, "I don't think it's going to be as cool as you think it is." And he's like, "No, I want to help you burn a CD." And then we go down, we go to my office, and he's like, "What's a CD?" And that hurt. That really hurt.
Because it's them, it's just totally different.
What's a
It's just,
CD?
yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
have to tell you, you know what hurt the other day is we just relocated my family from New Mexico to North Carolina. Literally, like I'm in this new office. I don't have any furniture yet. The reason my computer is shaking is because I'm using a card table, waiting for my desk to arrive. But now I forget what I was going to say. We relocated and we had, what did you say before that? I can't remember.
Burning
He's talking
CDs,
about
I
the
think.
CDs.
Oh, burning CDs. So before we left, we were trying to just dispose of, get rid of everything we could, right? Before the big move. And so my husband, we would just kept finding things, and he's trying to scan in all our photos so we can just get rid of the paper photos that just are fading anyways. And
Right.
so all the things, we're finding all the data, we're trying to condense it and put it on our servers. All these photos, we're trying to scan them in. And I come across this, so I have a stack of CDs, right, and DVDs. And he goes to burn them, and he's like, I wasn't able to get all of it because they're so old. The data is no longer good on several of them. So that was an experience that made me feel a little bit old since CDs were the hot new thing,
They were.
when I was younger. But I will say the cassettes from when I was 11 years old were still good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But what did you have to play it in?
We actually had to buy we had to buy a cassette reader converter. So
Right?
basically
Like,
it plays it out loud and then records it.
I remember when I got a boombox, you know what I'm saying, for
Yep.
university, and I was so excited that it would play a CD and it also would play cassettes, right? Like,
That was
yeah.
big living then. Or if you had a double tape
Yeah.
deck, you could copy. I mean, that was a big deal.
I had one of
Like-
those. I had one of those boom boxes that had the CD on top and the two cassette. Yes, yes, and
Mhm,
it was a thing. It was very exciting.
People don't appreciate kind of like, it was funny, you look back and it's like, the iPad came out, what, 2008-ish? 2009, maybe 2010. I think the iPhone came out in 07, 08. And my kids were born in 09 and after. Like the iPad's always been a thing, right?
mhm.
One of my favoritist, I don't know if that's a word. One of my most favorite stories is when my now teenager was a toddler. He'd go up to the flat screen TV and he would try to touch the screen like it was supposed to be a touch screen. And he turned and said, "It's broken, broken, broken." Like it's supposed to be a touch screen. It's fascinating how things like that shape your perspective of the world, right? So, it's going to be a generation of kids at some point in the future where quantum computing will have always been a thing, right? I know, right? Like,
Blows my mind.
but no, the march of technology, I think, is something that I also think that there's enormous opportunity for quantum computing. Right now, they can only solve certain types of problems, but I think that with creativity and engineering, it'll probably be more, right? And then we'll be able to maybe not pave over every undeveloped piece of land and turn it into a data center, right? Maybe. That would be
Let's
nice.
hope. Let's hope.
Right on. Let's hope. Yeah. And even if the data center isn't where I live, I'm basically between 3 Mile Island and Data Center Alley over in Ashburn, Virginia, which Dulles Airport. For those, if you're flying into Dulles Airport, if you see a building without any windows, it's a data center. It's not a warehouse. And they have to run these extra power lines to power all of that, right? And that's going to rip up a lot of farmland. It's going to disrupt a lot of family farms and things like that. So we really do need a new paradigm for computers, right? One of the things Jensen Huang talks about is how GPUs are a completely new paradigm. And he's not wrong, but I think we can do better.
Yeah, I mean, quantum computing, I think we still don't fully know how it will impact computing as a whole. And I think we won't really until they become available for everyone.
Yep.
And all those brilliant minds have free access all the time to go figure out how best to use.
No, I think that's a great way to put it, right? And think back to Bell Labs when they came up with the transistor. Did they really have TikTok in mind? Probably not.
Exactly.
Probably not.
Exactly.
They may not have
Like-
invented it if they had.
Yes, I think there's so much opportunity, and that right now, I mean, when I was in grad school, I feel like all the people in trapped ion quantum computing knew each other. It wasn't completely true, but it was mostly true. Like I'd look at the name on the paper and I'd recognize all the names. And that is not true now. It has exploded. I started grad school in 2008 and I graduated in 2013, and it has just exploded in the decade, 15 years, and that's awesome. But also it's exponential, and it's still going exponential. And so we just have more and more brilliant people working in the area, and it will just continue to grow and blossom, and it's super exciting.
Yeah, it's and 2013 wasn't that long ago.
No.
Thank you.
I
Yes,
mean,
no, it
It was
wasn't.
not
Was
that
it?
long ago. Like, and it really, it's just fascinating how quickly things have moved. But like, I think back to what I was doing in 2013, right? I had a Windows phone. I had a Zune, right? These are all punchlines to jokes now, right? But who knows what we'll be doing in 2036, or 2030, which is only 4 years away, which sounds really scary.
There's a lot of exciting plans from a lot of quantum computing companies in that kind of horizon, for sure.
I've noticed that. Yesterday there was some kind of executive order. I try not to watch the news, but I have noticed that there's definitely a lot of people, a lot of things are going to happen in quantum computing by the end of the decade, right? IBM says they're going to have something by 2029. The executive order had something to do with 2028 being a pivotal year for federal systems to be inoculated against this. So it's very fascinating how this is all coming together and how quickly it's coming together.
Definitely. Now that we have industry playing a role,
Right.
certain aspects can really accelerate, and that's exciting. And having a few start it and showing that there is start bringing that momentum there. Now there's just a lot of momentum and a lot of voice for supporting quantum computing and the expansion, and then therefore also a lot of dollars, which really helps.
And there's basically every industry can benefit from quantum in some way, whether it's finance, whether it's, obviously encryption, national security, that does affect everybody, but I'll put that in one box for now. But material science, biopharma, all sorts of things.
Climate. Yeah.
Climate, yeah. I mean, I live in a very windy place, and I would love nothing more than put up a couple of smaller turbines, because there's actually some interesting stuff. I was doing some Prime Day shopping, Candace. I didn't tell you about yet. But like one of the challenges is the battery, the energy storage, right? Like the turbines will cost. Solar panels are a great example of this, right? The solar panels are relatively cheap now, but the battery storage, if you wanted to kind of store the energy, it costs way more than that, right? And even then, battery technology is not. I wouldn't say it's a solved problem just yet.
I would say it's going to be a solved problem when it's not all day or 30 minutes,
Right.
What is it? I'm thinking about EVs, right? Electric vehicles. Yeah. And I would love to have an electric vehicle, but one, I'm waiting to buy a new car. And two, I still think about driving it cross country, and it's more planning. than a gas vehicle right now.
Yeah.
I
Right.
would say battery technology is there when you're not worried about that anymore. Considering that EVs, ultimately, my understanding at least, is that EVs are more fuel efficient than gas vehicles. So they should be able to go further. So I'm looking forward to that day, and I hope by the time I'm ready to afford my next car, it can have further mileage.
It's the battery technology, I think, is really
Yeah.
what, if you look at, I know a lot of people that own Teslas, and the battery technology isn't there. The larger car makers are realizing, hey, wait a minute, because they have this is kind of the interesting thing when you're talking about the switch to EV, is it's all well and good to say you want to do it by a certain time frame inside of 10 years, but the infrastructure around petroleum products and delivery of petroleum products and all the downwind supply chain of that has had 100+ years to develop, right? It's ridiculous to think you can replace it in 10 years, right? It's noble. Good on you. However, I forget what I was listening to, but it was a podcast about how gasoline, for whether you love it or hate it, is the fuel and the energy storage for the fuel, right? Whereas with electricity, you really have, they said it way more eloquently than I could, but it was basically like the idea that you can fill up your gas tank, even if it's a big gas tank, you can do that in minutes. Whereas if you're charging something, there are very real barriers right now, right? And until we solve that problem, that's why you see a lot of restaurants have car chargers, right? It's not because they care about the environment. They just know that if you are driving cross country, you have to wait 40 minutes to fill up, right?
Yep.
So what are you going to do in those 40 minutes, right?
I will say this. So I'm in Montreal, and the West Island flooded on the 20th, 4 days ago, and thousands of homes all have flooded basements and flooded garages. But interestingly enough, I live next door to a really great guy who owns a car dealership. He had someone drive over an electric vehicle, and then hooked up his water pump to the electric vehicle, and he was pumping out water before everybody else was doing it. And then when they turned off power for safety, he could still go because he had the electric vehicle in his driveway. It made me look at electric vehicle a little bit differently now.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a generator it's a giant battery on wheels.
So that was kind of interesting, right? I was like,
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
And they look really cool on the inside. I was in one when I came back from the airport like a month ago, and the whole thing is a gigantic monitor. It's just so pretty. It's just very pretty and soothing. So I don't know. I liked it. It was very, very nice.
So we're coming towards the top of the hour. We could probably talk all day, but where can people find out more about you, more about DQC, the Duke Quantum Center, not Dairy Queen Center? I'm going to reuse that joke a lot, Candace.
Okay.
My
I'll get
apologies,
prepared.
Rachel.
Let's see. For the Quantum Center, people can go to quantum.duke.edu
Okay.
or just search for the Duke Quantum Center. And now I've lost you guys. For me, I am on LinkedIn,
Okay.
Rachel Noek. And yeah, feel free to reach out. I love meeting people, talking to new people.
Awesome. Cool. Well, there's definitely a lot of cool stuff on the Duke Quantum Center website. And there's actually a conference coming up in July about the 5th North American Conference on Trapped Ions. Oh, no, it's at MIT, but it's on the Duke calendar. So I would imagine that you're involved somehow. Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, Duke Quantum Center is definitely involved in that, I'm sure.
Cool. Well, awesome. And with that, we'll play the outro music.
Thank you so much for having me on the
Hey,
show.
no problem. Thanks
It's
for
great.
coming
It was
on,
great.
and we appreciate it. And
fast. Candace and Frank blowing my mind at last. Quantum podcast, they're breaking the mold. Science and sky beats, it's bold and it's gold. The multiverse is skanking in time. Black holes are wailing in a horn line so fine. From Planck scales to planets, they're connecting the dots. Candace and Frank, they're the cosmic hot shot. Quantum podcast, turn it up fast. Candace and Frank blowing my mind at last. Quantum podcast, they're breaking the mold. Science and sky beats, it's It's bold and it's gold.